Cowboy confronts an 80-year-old Apache. 1 hour later, the son arrives with his own clan. Ethan Walker first saw the old man as a thin splash of color beside the trickling creek. 80 years of life wrapped in a sun-faded vest and a single braid that shone silver in the desert glare. The rancher pulled Chestnut to a halt on the ridge, dust clouds folding around the gelding's hooves. Here on land, Ethan had fenced with blistered hands. An Apache elder sat as though the earth itself had invited him. No horse, no campfire, only a cedar staff planted in the sand, and a face turned toward the water as if listening to its secrets. A gust lifted the brim of Ethan's hat, and memory stung him. Stories of midnight raids, unburied cattle, warnings whispered across chuck wagons. He had spent 10 years proving those tales would never repeat on Walker Range. So when Ethan tightened the reins and nudged Chestnut downhill, anger rose in steady beats with the rhythm of the horse's stride. 20 paces out, he dismounted, spurs ringing a harsh announcement. Gravel clicked under his boots while cicadas hushed, as though the desert itself held its breath. The elder did not flinch. He lifted calm eyes the color of wet earth and waited. "You're trespassing," Ethan said, voice low, clipped. "This ground is private. My brand, my water." The elder's gaze drifted back to the creek. "Water calls to every living heart," he replied, English shaped by older cadence. Words soft but bearing weight that settled between them like an anvil. Ethan felt heat crawl his neck. "Town's west an hour. Wells there. Plenty for visitors." He gestured toward distant saguaros, the only witnesses to this standoff. "Move along." Slowly, the Apache planted both hands on the staff and pushed to standing. Up close, Ethan glimpsed beadwork sewn with fading precision, scars etched along forearms weathered as aged leather. Dignity, not threat, radiated from the man. Yet Ethan's fists remained tight. Sweat gathered in his gloves despite the dry heat. "I am called Elias Gray Eagle," the elder said, steadying breath. "My feet remember this creek." His eyes met Ethan's again. No plea, no challenge. Simply truth offered like water cupped in a palm. "I don't care whose feet remember what," Ethan snapped, chest tightening against an uneasy tremor he refused to name. "Creek's inside my fence line. Keep moving." Elias inclined his head, sorrow rather than submission flickering in his gaze. He tapped the staff forward, each step deliberate, fragile. Ethan watched, arms crossed, boots rooted, muscles coiled. A hawk traced a slow circle overhead, its shadow skating across sand and sage. For one long heartbeat, Ethan thought of turning away, mounting up, letting the old man's silhouette fade into the shimmer where earth met sky. But the whisper of the creek, small, persistent, careless of property lines, gnawed at his certainty. And somewhere beyond the horizon, unseen clocks had begun to tick, counting down to consequences neither man yet imagined. Elias Gray Eagle had managed barely 3 steps when fate snagged his cedar staff on a hidden mesquite root. The elder pitched forward, ribs colliding with creekside stone in a crack that sounded too sharp for mere wood. Ethan's heart lurched. He lunged. But dust in the old man fell before his boots could close the distance. When the haze settled, Elias lay curled, breath whistling through clenched teeth, one hand splayed across his chest. For a moment, Ethan stood frozen, part outrage, part rising guilt. He could ride away, claim ignorance. But a lifetime alone on this range had not stripped him of every lesson his mother taught. Help, even when it hurts your pride. Dropping to a knee, he slid an arm beneath Elias's shoulders. The body felt impossibly light for a man who'd weathered 8 decades, yet it shuddered with pain at the slightest movement. "Easy now," Ethan muttered, guiding Elias onto the saddle blanket he'd spread beneath the cottonwood's wavering shade. Crimson dots freckled the elder's vest, where a jagged rib pressed inward. Each shallow inhale whistled, each exhale rattled. Ethan uncapped his canteen and tilted cool water past cracked lips. Elias drank in trembling sips, eyes half-lidded, yet still holding that unyielding calm. "Broken. Maybe 2, Elias whispered, voice rasping like grain against millstone. "Thank you, Ethan Walker." The name spoken with such quiet dignity landed heavier than any accusation. Ethan busied himself knotting a strip of cloth across the bleeding forehead, yet his gaze kept sliding to the injury beneath. A punctured lung could drown a man from the inside. Ethan had lost a ranch hand that way once. He swallowed hard. "Need to get you to town," he said, more to himself than to the elder. "Doc Chambers can—" Elias's hand found Ethan's sleeve, grip surprisingly firm. "No time for town," he breathed. "1 hour until sunset." "What's that matter?" "My son," Elias replied. "Marcus Gray Eagle. He watches the shadows of every day I walk. If I fail to return by sundown, he will ride, and he will not ride alone." Ethan's mouth went dry. Marcus, the tactician who welded splintered Apache bands into a single blade, was legend and rumor in equal measure. Some called him Peacemaker, others an avenging storm. Either way, he commanded warriors who followed without question. "How many will he bring?" Ethan asked, though dread already whispered the answer. "Enough," Elias said, letting the word fall like a pebble into still water. "Not for war, unless he finds reason." Ethan rose, scanning the heavens. The sun, a molten coin, hovered a handspan above the jagged horizon. Maybe 60 minutes, no more, before dusk painted the range blood red. In that shrinking wedge of daylight, Ethan had to choose. Abandon the rancher's hardened code of ownership or risk greeting an Apache war party with a dying elder at his feet. Wind rattled the cottonwood leaves like distant drums. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, drew a steadying breath, and realized the creek's gentle murmur now sounded eerily like a ticking clock. Hoofbeats announced themselves first, a subterranean thunder rolling across the basin long before the riders crested the rim. Ethan Walker felt the vibration through the soles of his boots, a primal drum that prickled every hair on his arms. He eased his Winchester from the saddle scabbard, worked the lever once, click-clack, 6 rounds ready, then forced himself to breathe. Beneath the cottonwood, Elias Gray Eagle lay propped against Ethan's saddle blanket, breath shallow, eyelids fluttering. 1 hour had not yet passed, yet the sun was already here. Dust plumed on the ridgeline, silhouettes materializing like spirits from a myth. 8 Apache warriors in single file, ponchos snapping, lances angled skyward. At their center rode Marcus Gray Eagle, taller than the rest, hair bound with twin hawk feathers that knifed the sky. He raised a fist. The line halted. Silence swallowed everything but the creek's mutter and Elias's ragged breaths. Ethan's rifle felt suddenly inadequate, a child's toy against the disciplined stillness of the riders. He stepped forward anyway, planting himself between father and approaching son. When Marcus nudged his stallion down the slope, every hoof fall seemed measured, deliberate, like a judge descending courthouse steps. At 10 paces, Marcus dismounted in one fluid motion, reins tossed to a waiting warrior. His gaze swept the scene. Ethan's tense stance, the rifle at half-mast, the wounded elder beneath quivering leaves, before settling on Ethan's face. Eyes black as obsidian held neither open anger nor mercy. They simply weighed. "You stand armed beside my father," Marcus said, English crisp, no accent to soften the edges. "Explain." Ethan's mouth felt packed with cotton. He slipped, cracked a rib or two. I gave water, shaded him. The word sounded thin even to him. Water. Marcus repeated the single syllable as if testing its flavor. He switched to Apache, kneeling beside Elias, voice low but urgent. The elder answered in the same tongue, short phrases punctuated by pained breaths. When Marcus rose, something unreadable flickered behind his eyes, part relief, part simmering threat. "My father says the fall was his own," Marcus announced. "He says you offered aid when you could have turned away. That act keeps this from being blood business." Ethan swallowed. "I'm glad he told you, but he needs a doctor. Town's an hour east." Marcus glanced at the sinking sun, now kissing the far mesas with molten light. "Night rides with fever," he said. "Moving him risks death." He studied Ethan a moment longer, decisions clicking behind his gaze. Then his voice hardened to iron. "Elias Gray Eagle will heal on this land." Ethan blinked. "On my ranch? Your creek, your sky, your responsibility." Marcus signaled 2 warriors forward, one lean and keen-eyed. Another broad-shouldered with storm cloud tattoos on each cheek. These men, Lone Wolf and Cedar Fox, remain. They will guard my father and tend your cattle. The proposal felt less offer than verdict. Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. Neighbors won't like Apache camped on Walker's soil. Then let them learn new liking, Marcus replied, voice quiet yet unyielding. My father lives, or the desert remembers who failed him. Lone Wolf knelt, checking Elias's bandage with practiced fingers. Cedar Fox surveyed fence lines as though mapping future duties. The efficiency unnerved Ethan more than open hostility. It spoke of men accustomed to solving problems while others hesitated. Marcus faced Ethan again. Until Elias walks unassisted, this place is circle ground. Half yours, half mine. Harm that balance and I return with more than 8 riders. He extended a hand, not for a shake, but as a gesture sealing terms. Dust motes spiraled between them, waiting. Ethan lowered his rifle. The weight of generations, fear, pride, scars older than their surnames, pressed on his shoulders. Yet the alternative was a war he'd lose before it began. He clasped Marcus's forearm. The Apache grip was stone strong, steady. Agreement forged, Marcus mounted, signaled his men. 6 riders wheeled and vanished over the ridge, leaving twilight's hush and 2 silent guardians in their wake. Ethan released a breath he hadn't known he held. Around him, nothing looked different. Same cottonwood, same trickling creek. Yet the world had irrevocably shifted, and the night ahead promised no comfort for a man who had just invited both danger and destiny across his threshold. Moonlight had hardly silvered the cottonwood leaves when Elias's breathing changed. Each pull of air, a wet rattle deep in his chest. Lone Wolf pressed an ear to the elder's ribs, then looked up, face grim beneath war paint. Lung filling, he muttered. Need white man medicine before dawn. Ethan felt a cold fist squeeze his gut. No doctor meant the elder could drown from the inside. Marcus was gone with 6 riders. The decision, action or failure, now rested squarely on Walker's shoulders. I'll fetch Chambers, Ethan said. Town's an hour hard ride. Cedar Fox stepped from the shadows, broad frame catching firelight. I ride with you. That'll spook him, Ethan argued. Better he be spooked than stubborn, the warrior replied, already tightening his saddle cinch. They thundered out at midnight, 2 silhouettes cleaving the vast plateau. The desert was a black sea, mesquite whipping past like skeletal sailors. Ethan leaned into chestnut stride, wind clawing tears from his eyes. Beside him, Cedar Fox rode bareback, balance perfect, as though sculpted to the horse's spine. Gas lamps still glowed in the windows of Dr. Nathan Chambers' clapboard office when they clattered to a stop. Ethan leapt onto the porch and hammered the door. Chambers opened, spectacles askew, jacket half-buttoned, and froze at the sight of the Apache looming behind Ethan. Walker, what madness! Elders dying on my land, Ethan cut in. Punctured lung. You're coming. Chambers glanced past Ethan to Cedar Fox's unreadable gaze. Fear flickered, then hardened into prejudice. I don't treat... Ethan slammed a palm against the jamb. This isn't about your rules. It's about an 80-year-old man drowning in his own blood. Cedar Fox stepped forward, voice calm, deadly precise. Marcus Gray Eagle values life saved. He also remembers life denied. He let the implication hang like a noose. Chambers' Adam's apple bobbed. I'd need instruments, chloroform, chest tube. They're in your bag, Cedar Fox said, pointing to the black leather satchel already resting by the doorway. Lone Wolf must have prepared it before they had ridden out. The doctor's eyes widened at the realization he'd been quietly orchestrated. He grabbed the satchel, hands trembling. The return ride felt even faster, urgency pounding harder than hooves. Clouds shredded across a pallid moon. Coyotes yipped somewhere far off, as though gossiping about the fate racing past them. When the trio reached the creek, Lone Wolf had rigged a makeshift lean-to, lanterns throwing nervous shadows. Chambers set to work instantly, knife glinting as he opened a slim incision between ribs, slid a reed tube to drain the rising fluid. Elias's eyes fluttered, a soft gasp of relief escaping as pressure eased. Cedar Fox knelt opposite the doctor, holding the lantern steady. gaze never leaving Elias's face. Ethan hovered, useless and necessary all at once, heart hammering louder than any gunfight he'd ever faced. After an eternity measured in racing pulses, Chambers tied the final knot, exhaled. He'll live, if infection stays away. Sweat shone on his brow like dew at dawn. Ethan released the breath he'd been hoarding, a shaky laugh slipping out. But relief was brief. Marcus still rode somewhere in the darkness, and dawn would bring fresh reckonings for doctor, rancher, and warriors alike. Dawn came gilded with promise. Elias Gray Eagle slept easily now, chest rising without the watery rattle, while Lone Wolf spooned broth from a tin and Cedar Fox mended Ethan's busted corral rail as though it were his own. 3 weeks had unspooled since the midnight surgery, and in that quiet span Walker Range had become something neither fence lines nor folklore had foreseen. That evening Marcus returned alone, reins slack, stallion blowing soft plumes into the cooling air. He found Ethan and Elias by the creek, the elder upright on a stump, braiding thin willow bark into a ring. "My father?" Marcus asked. "Stronger than the cottonwood," Elias answered, voice dusted with pride. He slid the bark ring onto Ethan's finger, an unexpected gesture of gratitude that made the rancher clear his throat and stare at the fading sky. Marcus dismounted and unrolled a weather-stained map across a flat stone. Rails inked in bright red speared through valleys toward the Walker property line. Mining claims peppered the margins like boils. "Surveyors will be here by fall," he said. "They want grazing water, timber rights. Alone, you will be pressed hard." Ethan studied the crimson lines, then glanced at the two Apache warriors who had become indispensable hands. Cattle located, storms predicted, fences patched without asking. The land felt larger now, as if perspective could widen acreage. "What's your offer?" he asked. "Shared pasture on our winter plateau," Marcus replied. "Your Longhorn bloodline to strengthen our horse herds. Joint voice when Washington men arrive." His finger tapped the rail route. "United, we can bargain, not beg." A month earlier, Ethan would have laughed the idea clear off his land. Now he weighed it the way he'd gauge a new mare. Eyes, stance, hidden spirit. "Equal partners," he said at last. "Decisions made together. If my herd drinks your grass, your foals roam my hay meadows come spring." "Equal," Marcus affirmed, extending his forearm. They clasped, muscle and sinew sealing more than a contract, sealing history rewritten. Behind them Elias chuckled, a low creek bed rumble. "My grandfather spoke true," he murmured. "Water belongs to all living hearts." Lone Wolf appeared with fresh coffee. Cedar Fox settled beside the fire to whittle a length of cedar into a flute. The campsite, once a triage ward, now hummed like a frontier village. Night spread its quilt of stars. Somewhere distant, a locomotive whistle floated across the mesas. Faint yet certain. Ethan listened without flinch. For the first time, the sound felt less like invasion and more like challenge met. He turned to Marcus. "When the rail bosses come, they'll ask why a cowboy stands with Apaches." Marcus smiled, eyes glinting in firelight. "Tell them a creek taught him the world is wider than a fence." Ethan laughed, a full, unguarded sound that rolled out into the darkness and echoed off the canyon walls. The elder, the leader, and the rancher sat shoulder to shoulder, and the restless Arizona night carried their shared future forward on the hush of flowing water.